There's about 35,000 of us guys out here at Mare Island. We're working 24 hours a day, fixing up busted ships and building new ones. Talk about your total war effort. Brother, we got it here at Mare Island.
Hello, everybody. I'm Justin Crosley.
It's Ryan Gibbons.
Kent Fortner.
And this is Battleships to Beer, 10 years of Mare Island Brewing Company. And we, folks, are on episode 10.
We made it.
We made it through.
Do you have Europe queued up for the final countdown? I feel like we're there.
I can do that, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I was going to say, like, oh, the final episode, it's the big ending. And I know that that's how you guys are feeling, too, because we made it through to 10. But I'm going to admit, I've had so much fun that there's a little part of me that hopes that, like, we end up sneaking in some other follow-ups, whether that be soon or down the road. I think I just had a good time telling this story with you guys.
I agree. You know, and I've actually heard from some of our listeners and friends, like our good friend Guido. He keeps telling me all the time. He listened after the second one. He goes, "You guys just can't stop at 10." He's like, "There's no way." He goes, "There's so many stories. I'm so hooked."
Yeah.
So again, him and my mom are listening now. But no, I agree. There's just it's kind of hard to put a period on this when I feel like the story's just still being written.
Well, if nothing else, we'll do one at 20. And one at 30,
there we
and
go.
One at 40. That's our anticipation.
Man, you've got a lot of faith in our health.
Yeah. Yeah, at 90, we'll be sitting around the same table.
Not necessarily saying that we will be here, but, you know, next generation.
We'll be doing it, yeah. Your kids.
Speaking of next generation, Ryan,
yeah,
we're in the final countdown on another big thing.
Yeah, so I guess I could get a text any moment now in the recording of this, but my third son is due any minute now. We're actually in overtime as it goes to pregnancy. My first kid was 6.5 weeks early, second was 4 weeks early, and that 4 week early in this timeline was Friday. So we're in all new territory right now.
Oh boy!
But we're in baby watch,
and because we're recording podcast, we have to put our phones on Do Not Disturb, and I think Ryan he's like, oh, wait a minute.
Are you cheating a little bit?
Not at all, but you know, at the same time, everybody keeps asking, "Are you ready?" It's like third kid. You know, it's almost just like we know what we're doing.
That was my question for you: is are you nervous? But you're not even nervous.
No, the biggest thing at this point, it's not like how do you change a diaper? You know, how's the breastfeeding thing all work? How can I help? It's like, what do I do with these other knuckleheads while this one's in? And
right.
You know, so and the boys, Isaac and Mason, they're 7 and 4 at this point, and so they're old enough that they're actually excited to be a part of it for now.
Okay.
But I'm sure there's going to be some headlocks and nuggies in like 3 years or whatever.
Of
we're
course.
going to be getting them out. But no, we're Leah and I are super excited about this edition.
And you've been getting out to do the family apple picking before you get closed up here.
Yeah, we've been foraging on Mare Island. I think we spoke to this earlier about Alden, who had all the sailors bringing all these saplings and trees from around the world. Well, there's just fruit trees all over Mare Island. And so Leah and I, we used to rent one of the Q Quarter homes over there, and we know every backyard that has the fig trees in this one, the apple trees over here, and we were there this weekend and filled 2 massive bags up with apples.
Nice. Ryan comes to me and he's like, "Hey, there's the one that's over there that the foundation looks after. Are you okay if we raid that one also?" And I'm like, "Yeah, go get them. They're a little underripe, but your kids don't seem to care."
Right?
No, they're again. I got mouths to feed here. So yeah.
Well, let's hope we make it through this episode before. For sure.
And congratulations.
Thank you. It's an exciting.
You've
time.
got a clan, man. You got a whole clan.
Well, I mean, we didn't plan for any of this as far as like, boys, girls, whatever, how it went up. But thankfully, I have 3 boys to look after this brewing company after
there
this.
There you go.
It would have been nice to have a little girl charm in there, but at the same time, got to have these boys taking care of mom and the brewery.
Well, that's the perfect lead-in to today's topic, really, which, we've been telling you about the history of Mare Island in the last 10 years. And today is really to recap a little bit, but to talk about the future also. And Ken, I've noticed you mention several times as you're telling stories throughout the podcast that you guys you want to be a legacy brewery, and you've got really in your mind a 30-year plan.
I mean, it's hubris for sure, but if anything, I've never really cared about getting rich, but I do like the idea of leaving some sort of mark. And I think apropos to what Ryan's talking about, I mean, my kids are that in a lot of ways. I, put my heart and soul into them because you figure you live on in some way through your children and your grandchildren or whatever else. But yeah, if we could put together a business that that has as much anchor as Mare Island itself does, pardon the pun, in history over time, like that, we're really trying to look long term. And sometimes that means just staying alive for a couple more days or a couple more weeks. But, we try really hard to look that direction. And that was kind of the topic for the day, I guess.
I love it. Well, do we have a celebratory beer for episode 10?
Actually, I brought so we have started this rotator beer series, and we call it the Workshop series. And it's not necessarily all the way up into our main lineup of beers, but what we're doing is we are celebrating and telling the stories of the different shops that were on Mare Island. So, there was the ship fitters shop, there was the pipe fitter shop, the electrical shop. And so each one of these beers, we're releasing about 3 of them a year. And each one of the beers talks about the different shops, what they did. But one of the things we do different on this is we actually lean into the hops and the grain bill, and it's just front and center on the label here. And this one right here is Shop 11, and Shop 11 was the ship fitters shop. And what they did is, and as it says on the side of the can, they would bend and shape all of the metal that would go onto ships and submarines, and they would do about 650 tons worth of bending a week.
Wow.
Which is about enough steel to make a submarine. And this one right here, it's we change the style each time they come out, and this is a West Coast IPA. Mm-hmm. It was kind of the fun thing for me in the production is allowing our current brewers to kind of come up with these recipes and kind of tweak them and kind of use them as our workshops. And this was done by Mackie,
Small but mighty.
Yeah, small but mighty. Mackie is a twin, and she came to us from Gordon Biersch, and this is her second gig. And
she's well trained then.
Well trained, but you don't get a lot of recipe development at a place like Gordon Biersch. And
sure.
So, we've got our pilot system, and she actually was working on this one for a while, and I figured it was a nice time to let it shine. And so this one, she took a blend of Rawaka hops from New Zealand, Idaho 7, and Strata hops.
Nice.
And so it's kind of really nice and, got that strong grapefruit, strawberry, citrus kind of dank to it that we call it. But at 6.6%, I think she really nailed it. We did a couple, a couple pilots on it, but we just released it a week ago. So felt like if this is kind of a newer series that we're doing, and we're kind of hoping to end on a where are we going next is, fun beers like this.
The aroma is incredible. Yeah. It's a very new school hop bill that you just gave there, which is here at the Hop Grenade. That's some of our favorite types of IPAs. So you're right up our alley with that. The aroma is incredible.
I brought a can for Lewis to try. Hopefully you guys will get it on draft here. But
it's already got my endorsement.
That's a ringing one.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
Smells really nice.
They actually, if you look at the label too, it's got there's a piece of equipment. It's massive, and if you look closely at the label, you'll see there's a guy actually in the icon that we did.
Yeah.
And that huge piece of equipment, is for bending gigantic pieces of metal that you would use within, say, a nuclear submarine. And we went over to where Shop 11. One thing to understand is the shop is a collection of workers, but they don't necessarily work out of one place. So Shop 11 was a collection of metal benders, so to speak, sheet metal workers, and they might be scattered across all kinds of buildings across the island. But one of the main buildings that they were in, still standing and everything else, and we sent Max, our marketing guru, over there, and he went in there, and we had already had pictures of this machine because everybody talked about this machine, and lo and behold, it's still in use in that building.
Oh, really?
So we have pictures of 4-pack of the beers sitting right there with the machine in the background.
Yes.
And they're like, oh yeah, we got this machine with the lease when we signed our lease in 1997 when the base closed, and we've been using it ever since.
What are they bending metal for on that?
They deconstruct and rebuild pieces of bridges, basically.
Wow.
So Bay Bridge, bridges from all over the world, but they take out huge pieces and they'll put something temporary in there on the bridge, obviously to keep the structural integrity of the bridge going, bring it back, sandblast down all the rust, everything else, and then repaint it and then take it back over there. So they're basically building a bridge one piece at a time that kind of restores or rebuilds a bridge. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Incredible.
A classic thing that you kind of can only do on Mare Island. There's not very many places in the country where something like, there's just lay down pieces everywhere around Mare Island that this company's called XKT. They've been there a long time and they just work on bridges.
Amazing.
Yeah.
The Mare Island, it's always something weird going on there. Yeah. Some ingenuity to this day.
Hey, speaking of workers from Mare Island and highly skilled laborers, am I to understand, Justin, that the wolf paid you a visit out here?
Yeah, the actual wolf. So the Hop Grenade is also in its 10th year, as we might have mentioned. And like clockwork, people told me, hey, there's going to be some maintenance at 10 years. They didn't tell me that all of my appliances would have a meeting and decide to fail at exactly the same time.
Opulescence.
And I'm not exaggerating. I'm talking about my refrigerators, my oven, like everything just went down within like a 2-week period of our 10th anniversary. And anyhow, I'm struggling with the refrigerators, and I have someone come and fix them, and he doesn't really fix them, and it's just some kid who doesn't know shit as far as I'm concerned. And I'm paying top dollar still, and anyhow, I come back in the I'm out there in the front working on things. I come back in the studio. I've got to get some editing done on my Mare Island project. And I'm editing the Wolf episode. I'm editing the bonus episode. And it's not even, I'm a slow learner. It's not even dawning on it. I'm just doing my editing. And sort of towards the end, I'm like, wait a second. Why don't I call the wolf? Perfect. I mean, I've just listened for an hour to Ryan talk about how this is the guy if you've got a problem. So I text Ryan. I go, hey, man, I really need the wolf.
It literally is. It's one of those moments where you're like the fourth or fifth person that has come to me and it's like, who's your refrigeration guy? But you knew the story of the wolf, and you did. It wasn't even like a back and forth. It was like, I need the wolf. It's like, I don't even want to go through like what's going on. I just need the wolf.
So you give me the number. I text him within 10 minutes. Yep. He's right back to me.
Perfect.
And he's like, I'll be there this weekend.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if you mentioned it, but it's kind of his side gig to help people like us, right? So, and I wasn't sure about that. So, because at first he's like, I don't know when I have time. And then he goes, as a matter of fact, I'm fixing someone in your area on Saturday. I'll just come on by. Comes by, fixes me right up.
Yeah.
And we look through the invoice of the kid, let's just call him. And he's like, oh yeah, man, you got screwed on this deal. So I don't think I'll ever be calling anybody else again.
You shouldn't. And then I understand too, like you had a piece of equipment that you were trying to sell or something, and you were trying to figure out, and then you spoke to the wolf about it because he told me the story as well.
So that too. So 2 of my refrigerators, the wolf probably could have fixed, but they were about a decade old by the time I got them, and then they were a decade longer, and I was just kind of fed up with them. And the doors, they're customer facing, so they're my 2 glass door refrigerators that we sell all our cans out of, and the doors are bashing against people, and so I just said I'm going to replace them, but to get rid of the 2 old ones is a problem. For one, nobody really wants them, as far as I can tell. I put them on Craigslist for 2 weeks, and I call a hauling company, and they want $600 to take them away. Jesus. And I'm just like, what am I going to do with these things? So again, it dawns on me, maybe the wolf wants them for parts or something. I text the wolf. This one's even faster. 5 minutes later, a restaurant in Benicia calls me and says, hey, the wolf gave us your number. We want to come look at your refrigerators. And they were gone a couple days later. And I made a couple bucks on them, so he's as advertised, Ryan.
Well, I'm glad, because, the last thing I'd like to do here in this podcast is false advertise. But the wolf, I'm telling you, if you're out there and you need him, email me, because he's your guy.
He's the real deal. And I'm kind of gearing up for a vinyl night here at Hop Grenade. Oh. So he comes, before we're open. So I'm over here just playing with my records, and he's just singing along the whole time. He knew it. He's like, hey, I went to that concert. I'm playing the Talking Heads. He's like, yeah, I went to that show. And he's singing along to every record I play. Great guy, and I was happy to have the resource.
When we recorded that bonus episode, I didn't have many notes. I wasn't really sure which way I was going to go, because I knew some stories, but after that, even Kent told me before I was sitting down with him, he's like, are you ready for it? I was like, I think so. He's like, I'm sure you just turn the mic on and let him go.
Yeah.
And after I got done with that bonus episode, I was like, man, I could literally do an episode a week with this guy.
Of course.
And it would just start off by going, hey, Wolf, so what happened yesterday?
Exactly.
And it would just take you on this adventure. So.
Well, and let me give you a little plug, folks. If you haven't listened to the Wolf episode, here's a little teaser. I'm going to be honest, I don't listen to every word if I don't have time of the bonus episode. Sometimes I got to edit and get in and out.
Fair enough.
Well, in the Wolf episode, I get up to the point where Ryan asks, hey, tell us about your daughter. And I'm intrigued already. I'm like, oh, well, where's this going? Listen to me, folks.
Yeah.
Go listen to this episode. I was glued. I had to listen to the thing twice because I didn't get any editing done. I was just listening to the story of the wolf, and this. It's an incredible, inspiring, and a cool story about the wolf and his daughter.
Yeah.
Go listen to the episode.
For sure.
Just trust me on that.
He's just so unique.
Yeah.
But then he has so much heart in that guy.
Yeah.
It's just like, so it's this crazy. I mean, there's a lot of crazy people out there, but there's not people that he's so smart. He's got such a big heart. And then the stuff he kind of gets himself into and he's totally willing to share.
Yeah.
No problem.
Oh, yeah. No, he opens right up.
Completely transparent.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
Cool person.
Well, I'm glad you got
Yeah, I was
that.
gonna say that's
Yeah, that
awesome.
works
It
out.
really warms my heart for sure.
Absolutely. All right. Very good. Well, since we're doing 10 years, I didn't get to go. I think I was out of town. Can we talk about your 10-year anniversary party?
You were invited, but
I know.
you were out of town.
I know. Tell me, how did it go?
I would say it was an absolute smash.
Oh, God.
Like, we didn't know like kind of how many people would be there. We had a little VIP list, and we thought we were going to get 400 people there, which is a massive party on the in front of the coal shed there. We had over 1,000 people show up.
Wow.
Yeah.
It really, I tell you, it really brought it home about what our brand and what Mare Island meant to the community. And
Sure.
We say it all the time, like our brand I think has the legs just because of what it means to our community, and damn if our community didn't show up and tell us what that meant to them.
That's amazing.
I mean, we had some really special things there. We had Harold Bray, the last survivor of the Indianapolis, was there with his family, which was absolutely special.
The ferry came and did a 360 loop and blew their horn.
Really?
At the
Yeah.
very beginning. Just the ferry service has been a big part of our business, and we've been doing a lot of stuff with them. And they're like, hey, how about if we just send the ferry down and we do a giant 360, which is just not something you see a ferry do very often.
That's
and so
incredible.
People, that was the first thing that happened, and people are at the party. They're kind of looking at it, and I'm like, look, we're going to do something on the hour every hour. Just stick around. And they're like,
wow,
that's and that's just the first one.
Yeah.
And so that was really fun.
And then, Kent, you found some Civil War reenactors?
Well, we had this vision because it was gracious, but the federal, state, and local wrote these resolutions saying, thank you for Maryland Brewing Company for, ensconcing history and all this stuff. And so there was going to be some luminaries there handing these things off or whatever. And I was like, man, what I really want to do is I want them to do that. And then I want to line them up along with a couple key employees, Kieran, who we've talked about, and a couple people from the foundation. And then I want to hand a giant sparkler off to the first person, who hands it to the next person, who hands it to the next person, all the way down. And then I want to fire off a gigantic ass cannon.
Of course
That's what
you
I
do.
really want to do. So I start looking for a cannon. And there was a Mythbusters episode that had a cannon. I went back and watched it to try to figure out who they used for the cannon. I'm calling around to yacht clubs.
I was gonna say the Vallejo Yacht Club
Yeah,
has
because the
one.
yacht clubs used to have cannons, but they don't, to fire off races, but they don't really do that anymore. They just use shotguns or just like an air horn blast. And I'm calling around, and all of a sudden it was actually through the Benicia Museum. The executive director there, Jen, she's like, who's got one? And she's like, the Civil War reenactors. And so I call, I look it up, and I find these guys, and they dress up in full on gear for the Civil War. And they sent, it's probably a dozen of them over there or something like that. And they had this giant cannon named Flo, and it was a 3-inch diameter. And it was probably 6 foot long bore or cannon itself with a giant wheel that's comes up to about Bishnip's high, and it was like this gigantic cannon, and it was black powder and the whole 9 yards. So what's funny is, and to those who might be listening in the luminaries, we didn't tell them what it was going to be. And, permitting, this is kind of a forgiveness, not a whatever.
Yeah.
And they're standing in line, and I hand this giant 3-foot sparkler off to the first person, and they're realizing what they're about to participate in. And they're both incredibly excited, but I can also tell they're a little apprehensive, like, wait a minute, I'm going to be part of the one that lights this cannon that fires off towards Vallejo or whatever. But it went off. It was absolutely glorious.
We ended up, so in the full line of everybody, we had, like I said, the luminaries, some special employees, and then the sparkler was handed to me, and then I handed it to Harold Bray.
Yeah.
And so the Harold Bray, being the last survivor of the Indianapolis, then handed it off, and actually he lit the cannon off. And so and they did, was it three?
Two firings.
Two firings of that. But I mean, it was boom.
Of course.
It really.
I was like, let's just do a firing. One's good, and they're like, well, we're coming all the way down there. Can we do it twice?
We brought enough powder for two. We're like, of course,
you can do two if you want to, and you each get 2 beers. Let's drink them after we fire the cannon.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was good. And then the sort of tour de force at the very end was, and this was through a whole bunch of contacts, we managed to get these 4 planes that flew overhead 1,000 feet off the deck, which was as close as they could get, trailing smoke. And they did a whole formation flyover. They did 3 flyovers of everything. And to get nobody knew this was going to happen. To get everybody out there, we said we were going to take a drone family photo. And so everybody got out on the waterfront. And then, they're all holding beers. And I'm waiting. I'm on a little radio. I'm talking to this guy. He's in the plane, and they're flying 10 feet from each other. So he's kind of paying attention to me, kind of not. And I'm trying to figure out how far away they are because they're going to come up really fast. And Ryan's taking the drone shot, and he's kind of done. I'm like, Ryan, pretend like it's not working because I need to get everybody to stay out on the waterfront. And sure enough, and here comes the planes, and people they went ape.
Of course they did.
And the band was fantastic about it because they saw it coming.
Okay, go ahead.
Collectivity was the band, and the one they were on a break, and they kind of see what's going on, and they come over. They're like, should we play the theme music to Top Gun? I go, absolutely.
Like danger zone.
It was the dun, dun.
That's right.
Yeah, it was absolutely perfect. So you've got Top Gun theme coming, these airplanes coming over, streaming smoke behind them.
Where did you get these airplanes?
That's a
I don't know why I'm surprised by anything anymore.
That's one I'm going to keep in my back pocket because I may need to do it again, and I don't necessarily need anybody else. Like these guys were just excited to do it, but I think if 10 people called them, they might not. So I'm going to keep that one to myself.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Wow, so that sounds epic.
Needless to say, it was an epic celebration, and I have to give it up to Jim Rykowski here.
Yeah.
Like, I'll be honest with you. This was when Kent and I were thinking about our 10-year anniversary. We're like, all right, what do we do? And, you were talking about doing this podcast, and we're like, let's just do this podcast. That could be like what really encapsulates our 10-year anniversary. And so Jim Rykowski, who, of course, I do a bonus episode with as well, he's talking to me one day having a beer, and he's like, so, 10 years, huh? And I was like, yeah, man, I can't believe it. He's like, going to be a party? And I was like, we haven't really thought about a party at this point. I was like, but we're doing a podcast. And he's like, huh, just doing a podcast, huh?
Yeah, right.
And I walked away, and I was like, shit. I said, Ken, we got to do a party.
I'm like, didn't think about that.
I tell you, we started it in April. This party was in August, and it came together really quickly. And, and I think we did it well, and the fun little things we did along the way. We even did a 10-year special beer that we did just for this. So I think if you guys were there out there, really appreciate that support. But we had a hell of a time. That's for sure.
Honestly, more than the flyover, more than the cannon, it was like my big fat Greek wedding or something like that. God. Like, we got to see everybody that we've talked about in this podcast that we haven't seen in a long time. And they're just coming up as if it's like a family reunion or something like that. And the amount of people I hugged and had a beer with, and the compliments that came our way, and the people that we got to thank for what they did to help support us, it was a really cool. Like, you got to stop and take note every once in a while of how you got somewhere and who helped you and the impact you've had. And it took me days to come down from the high off of that party because of that, more so than even the flyover.
It was one of those things. I think I told you afterwards, Kent, like, I saw people I hadn't seen forever, and I got like maybe 4 words with them until somebody was behind them. And my Greek wedding is probably the best way to say it, because I just didn't get the quality time that I wanted with so many of the folks there, but it was just so great to see everybody.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I think you maybe even explained it a little bit for me here, Kent, but I've learned recently that people really do like milestones. We had our 10th anniversary party, and it ended up being the busiest day we've ever had in 10 years. Congrats. But here's the kind of juxtaposition to that. We've been a little slow lately. The beer industry is a little different. Concord's a little different. And so I really wasn't sure who was going to show up.
Right.
But we had a very similar experience as you're describing. Everybody showed up from like day one, even if they hadn't been here in a while, because they like milestones. But I think more so, and this is what you had said, Kent, like, they want to show that you've had an impact, that you're a part of their life, that your business, the thing that you've created, is a part of their life, and people want to show up and celebrate that. And I think maybe that's always been true, but it's especially true now as people see restaurants and breweries falling by the wayside. 10 years has always been a big milestone in our business, but now more than ever. And so I noticed that too, that people just really want to come out and say thanks. And it's a little overwhelming, and it is exactly the moment in time that you should stop, appreciate, recognize that what you've done has had an impact beyond on your own life, right? Beyond on your own family and the people that you employ, but certainly your community.
I think we have to apologize as well, because we couldn't make it to yours. So how many planes did you have fly over?
Oh my God, you guys so showed me up.
But no, what did you guys do?
We had about 20 fly over because we're right near the airport here, the Concord Airport.
Couldn't do that.
We're in the landing pad.
Couldn't do that.
We had like a Makers Fair market and a live band, and honestly, because in the past we've actually done kind of more stuff. It's part of why I didn't know how many people would show up, but people really just wanted to be here to say thanks. And we were just jam-packed for 8 hours. I mean, it was a long, busy day. And we just couldn't have been more thankful for it.
That's awesome.
I can tell you, I know for those of us in the brewing industry, the Brewing Network has been, something that's super special to us. But I also know how important the Hop Grenade is to the Concord community. So in the same way, you've got something special here as well. So I'm glad that they came out and supported you.
They very much did, and I thank them as well. But it's cool to see, because as you guys are saying, you're gearing up, and let's plan a podcast, and that really wouldn't have been enough. It wouldn't have done justice, not just to you guys, but to your community, because they wouldn't have felt like they get to come participate.
Yeah, I think they would have been pissed.
Yeah.
They would have been pissed. And similar to that, the podcast itself, the people that couldn't make it or that live out of town or whatever else, the podcast has been its own little generation of re-triggering a bunch of reconnections that we hadn't seen in a long time. We talked about Ariana Brogan earlier in, I think, the cast of characters, and she did our original labels back when she was charging us $14 per hour to work on our labels back in the day. And we hadn't talked to her in, it's been...
I'd say 6-7 years.
6 or 7
easily.
years we hadn't talked to her or something. And then I don't know how'd she get the podcast?
I got text out of the blue, and she's just like, Ryan, oh my God, like all caps. She's like, I just heard the episode, your podcast, and you're talking about us. She goes, first off, thanks for calling me out, because I did drop off the map, and I'm trying to get better. And she goes, but oh my God, she's like, I'm just crying. This is so fantastic. I'm so proud of you guys. And then come to find out, she was getting married, and so
imminently,
like 3 weeks later. And so Kent and I actually packaged up two cases of beer and sent them out there to
nice.
I was in Vermont, and so wanted to make sure our beer was there, because she was just so pivotal to us getting started. So
that's cool.
Again, it's kicked the can around and gotten these old acquaintances back into the mix. So.
I've gotten some random messages too. My bookkeeper, my Brewing Network bookkeeper of like 15 years, writes to me, and she's never ever talked to me about my podcast before. She just does my books.
Okay.
She's like, hey, driving along right now, listen to your Mare Island podcast. It's amazing. I love it. I think she's a fan of yours. She's not a fan of mine. She's just my bookkeeper. She's a fan of yours. And Hillary at Diablo Hills Bookkeeping. Give you a little plug, Hillary. I don't know if you want it or not, but she was like, this podcast is great. So some random connections there too.
I mean, Hillary, come by the brewery. We'd love to say hi, show you what we're talking about.
I think she has a really good band too. So Hillary, reach out to the Mare Island boys, because they do a lot more events than I do that require live music.
This sounds like a new wolf.
I know. Yeah.
Totally.
This is the financial wolf. I like it.
On base. It'd be great. It's fantastic.
Yeah. All right. Well, look, we've got a lot to talk about today, so why don't we take a quick break? And when we come back, I want to talk about you've hinted at it throughout the episodes, Kent, but sustainability, I think, is a big part of your future.
Indeed.
As it should be any brewery's future. So when we come back, we're going to dive into how Mare Island is going to help us be a little more sustainable as we move into the future. Hang in there. We'll be right back. Here at the Battleships to Beer podcast, we love getting listener questions, and we get lots of them. So we're going to do our best to answer them here on this and future episodes of the show. If you've got questions, send them to podcast@mareislandbrewingco.com. And now, here are some listener questions we've received. We are back with another Q&A with Ryan and Kent. This listener writes in, I don't see a lot of breweries out there that still have beer clubs. What made you guys want to start one? And would you recommend it to other breweries that are just starting out?
Yes, I would recommend it. I think you should tread carefully. I will say this: there were certain things that we got right. We were trying to translate kind of the wine club world because that's
wine guys.
Yeah, because we were wine guys and kind of translate that over. And certain things translate great. People want to be a part of the club. They want to come to parties. They want first crack at the new stuff, and that all works really, really well. I think actually what's tricky is, in this little, economics of brewing, but when you're buying a $600 case of wine and you're shipping it somewhere in California and it costs $50 to ship it, well, that's less than 10%. It's kind of a rounding error. But if your case of beer costs $85 and you're spending $50 to ship it, that's a different world. So that didn't translate, I think, quite as well as maybe we thought it would. And the other thing I'll say is, and this is not to disparage any Yardbirds, but once you give a perk, it's awfully hard to pull it back. So you got to be very calculated and careful about what you're extending. We have a friend who can remain nameless who I remember he handed me a card when he started his alcohol beverage company, and he's like, this is a free tastings for life and a 20% discount for life. And I was thinking, I don't know if you really want to hand something to somebody for life, because you never know when you're going to sell it, and I'm going to show up with that card someday and they're going to be like, what the hell's going on here? So you definitely got to kind of calculate the perks carefully, because they're hard to massage and unwind or change later on if you want to adjust. I don't know, Ryan, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think yes, you should do it, but it's really tricky because you really need to know your customer base and what they want. So it's not something that I would come out of the gate and just say, hey, we've got a beer club. I mean, it may be a good, marketing ploy to kind of get people to know about your brand. But really what the club is you need to give the people what they want. And a lot of it is, we've had this beer club now 8.5, 9 years now, and it's adapted, and a lot of it has adapted through, we've seen big growths of members starting, and then we've seen a little bit of attrition. Certainly the pandemic kind of had a little of both of that, where everybody was drinking more, and then all of a sudden everybody was saving their money a little bit. But you have to be ready to adapt the club, because and ask your members, after members have been in for a while, what do you want to see from the club? So it's been a tricky thing to navigate, but I tell you, the Yardbird parties make it worthwhile. And you definitely know who your major supporters are through your club. I mean, you're not going to see they may come into your tap room 5 times a week, and you might see them one of those times, but you see their revenue, but you don't know they're there 5 times a week. You know every beer club party, Jim Rykowski's going to be there. Yep. David Bales is going to be there. Sean and Mary Kate are probably going to be there winning a trophy. So that kind of loyalty is something that really helps you know you're on the right path.
We love our Yardbirds.
We do love our Yardbirds. By the way, sign up online if you want to be a Yardbird and
shameless
be part
plug.
of shameless plug in that question, whoever the anonymous was here. But no, beer clubs, it's a great thing to kind of understand your barometer with your best customers.
Excellent. Send your questions into podcast@mareislandbrewingco.com, and you might hear them on a future episode. Now, back to the show. Welcome back to Battleships to Beer, 10 years of Mare Island Brewing Company. And we are celebrating 10 years and talking about the future as well. And throughout the episodes, we've asked for listener questions, which we've gotten plenty of, by the way. Where can people send their questions still?
It's podcast@mareislandbrewingco.com.
Get them in fast.
Yeah,
get them in fast. We could still answer them for some of our bonus episodes, or you might get an actual email answer back too.
Yeah, indeed.
But I know that Cam had written in about the topic I teased before the break about sustainability. And what was the specific question, Ken?
I actually don't recall. I just remember he was, first of all, Cam we've known for a while, and he is deep into the sustainability world, and he works for too long of a story for this. We worked for a really cool company that floats buoys all over the world to figure out the tides and shipping lanes so they can actually reduce the cost of fuel and the CO2 imprint of fuel on ships. And so Cam is always, he's been somebody, he knows our marketing director really well, and he's always come by and helped at Yardbird parties and stuff. And he's always interested in sustainability, and he knows it's a big push for ours. And so I've always bounced things off of him, whatever, but I don't remember the exact question. The question even started in, I was like, well, I think that's something we should keep for an episode when we get into the whole thing. So,
okay.
But, one of the things we're doing with our 10th anniversary and talking about in this podcast is, where do we go here? And I think there is a cycle, if you will, to businesses where when you're first getting started, you're just hanging on by the skin of your teeth most of the time, and you're just barely, getting by, and you want to buy things as cheap as you can possibly get them and sell them for as much as you can. And, if some guy get thrown away, you just need to get it out of your way and all this stuff. And it's not that we haven't developed into some big industry business or something like that, but we do have a little bit more breathing room after 10 years to kind of take a step back and take a look and say, okay, what can we do better to help the world be around in 20 years from now, to help the world be thriving in general 30 years from now? And I have to say, it's been fascinating. It's been a lot of time, a lot of energy. It has not led the direction necessarily that I thought it was. It's never been straightforward trying to answer these questions. But in analyzing these things and looking at them, if you take out the amount of time we spent looking and analyzing it, I think almost every decision we've made has actually increased our bottom line, which, you hear a lot of talk in politics about that. Oh, this will be job creation, or this will be whatever. Now, part of I would say, attribute of this is that everything thrives under care. So if you're going to put a spotlight on something like water use or something like that, you're just going to do better because you're measuring it, you're looking at it, et cetera. But in looking at the different ways that we can modify our water use or whatever, suddenly your water bill's going down and, you're saving money or what have you. And so we've, it was Ryan and Cheryl, our director of food and beverage, and chef David was with us, and Max, our marketing manager. And we really sat down, and we haven't gotten through all corners of the business, but we've looked at a significant amount of it. I don't Ryan, what's been the most take up of your time, I think, on all this?
One of the things, I guess, maybe is labels. Let's just say labels. We craft brewers, we don't produce as many cans to be able to order pre-printed cans by the truckload, which is what you kind of have to buy, which is 25 pallets. It's over, if I got the math right, 155,000 cans. And so with that, so we use labels. We get Shiner cans, and then we have a labeler, and you add the label in line when you package the cans. And we have on our label the nice little recycling symbol on there, and it's an aluminum can, and you feel like, hey, that we're doing good things. Well, as we start digging in further and further and start talking to to our local recycling plant, these get kicked off the line mostly because it's almost like your yogurt container that if you don't take the label off, it's not recyclable. And so one of the things that we've, Kent's been pretty strong in this, and we've been doing it with our brewer, Tom. He's been helping out as well. But we've been looking at how to make these labels more easily removable from our cans so that it is a more sustainable packaging. And Kent could probably rattle off the different adhesive numbers that are like off the shelf, but we've been going back and forth with our label company to try to get some samples, and they've been really good at setting up stuff, and they're certainly on the path, because we feel if we can crack the code to really make the label easily torn off, you're not going to have the glue backing on the can, then they could actually probably promote this product to other breweries and kind of help influence that. And I know we work a lot with the CCBA, and we've been trying to talk with them about, like, hey, is anybody really doing anything out here? And so we're just trying to contribute from that side of life. And then I
just making awareness about it. I really like that you guys are bringing this up. It wasn't too long ago that I think the LA Times even published an article about this, and specifically with craft brewers, that it was this great shift that craft brewers have done to move to aluminum, a more sustainable packaging. But at the same time, especially recently, there's not exactly an aluminum shortage, but there's a price problem with aluminum because so much of it is not being recycled.
Right.
So we've switched to this recyclable packaging that's not being recycled for the very reason you just mentioned.
Exactly.
And us consumers don't know that. So I'm just praising you for bringing up the topic. I also didn't know this until
we were
reading
producing
this.
it. We didn't know.
Yeah.
We had no idea until we start digging in and talking to the.
I'm feeling good about my bin full of cans, right? But
I was completely crestfallen when we found it because we made the move for a number of reasons. It was during COVID. We had to get things out there, and the whole industry was kind of moving towards. But I was like, this is great. It's so much more sustainable. It takes 90% less energy to recycle a can than it does to build one from scratch. And you're talking about your mining and everything else aside. You don't even have to do all that stuff. These cans can be recycled over and over and over again. So we went to it, and for 3 years now, I've been like, yeah, we're champions. We're saving the earth and everything else. And then we go to our MRF, our material recovery facility, which is where they do all the sorting, and they're like, yeah, these are polypropylene labels. These all get kicked out. And I was depressed for a few days. I was like, I can't believe we put all that effort into this, and that's what's happening. And I will say, I'll tread carefully here, it felt like a little bit of a dirty little secret out there. And I was like, well, I don't really want to tell anybody that for the last 3 years, none of our cans have been recyclable or whatever.
Right.
But at the same time, I was like, this is a travesty. And so interestingly, we started looking into it. I mean, I've probably made 50 phone calls about this. I talked to the guy who's head of Microsoft's sustainability, not because of cans, just I was like, hey, I'm trying to look at this a certain way. Who can I talk to? How can I work through stuff? We're going through label producers. We've done 4 trials, and part of it is you still want the can to perform. And so if you paint on there, if you print onto the can, it could work. But we do 300,000 cans a year or something like that total. Right. We do 12 different styles. We can't do 155,000
that's
of
a
one
lot
style.
of warehouse.
We couldn't do a workshop 11 that's sitting here on the desk in front of me. We have to be able to do these labels. Yeah. And so then what's crazy is we backed into it. It's got adhesive on one side and the label's on the other. That's how they actually peel the label off of the backing. They print deadening compound on the top corner and the edge of the adhesive side of the label. Then they put it all back together, ship it to us. We label everything up, and then you can reach with your finger up at the top and you can actually pick at this. And because it's got deadening compound on it, you can start the peeling process. And then now we're using TR440. We've been through all these different adhesives.
Is that Clean Flake technology?
We're not actually using Clean Flake. That's trademarked by somebody else. We did look at Clean Flake technology. And the thing is, so this is great. We get this can, you can peel it right off. But what if it's thrown in Uncle Lou's cooler that's sopping wet in the back of his boat for 3 hours or 3 days? Is it going to fall off and all that? Because the reason these labels are on with such permanent adhesive is because you don't want them falling off in the local grocery store's shelves. You don't want them falling off, over here in the Wolf's old refrigerators that you've got out here,
By the way, it's illegal for me to receive your cans if a label has fallen off. Yep. I have to call you and say you have to take this back. Yeah. Just so it's important in a lot of ways.
But, we found in the end, we ran all this. It cost us like 0.4 cents per label more, which was almost nothing. But the interesting thing is, because we're printing the deadening compound on the back of the label, we can actually print a message on the back of the label too. So there's a little Easter egg there. So somebody goes to peel it and take the label off, we can put something in there that's kind of helping push the story forward, et cetera. And then, the label still has to go in the trash, and that's a travesty. But the can is now perfect for being recycled. And so, if you can peel the labels off your cans, you can get any label off any can. It's just a matter of how hard it is. And I don't know, we've done 4 or 5 trials on this stuff of there's just stuff sitting around in cooler, stuff that's gone from the cold box to warm, stuff that's just been warm. And then we were doing blind testing on how much we pull off and everything else. So it's been this long process, but at the end, I think we're a better company for it. And I think we're going to do the right thing for the environment. And didn't cost us hardly anything.
And I think we should probably be transitioning to this new label for us as a company by the early spring next year.
Correct.
We obviously we still had to get our product out while we're trying this, but you even think about cans when we were in bombers when we started as 22-ounce glass. I mean, just even the carbon footprint of getting that glass to us, the weight and everything. Yeah. I mean, the can is the right solution to go to. It's even better for the beer. I mean, the beer tastes better inside of it. So, that's kind of what we're trying to look into the future is like, how can we refine and make this process better? I mean, we thought about it when we built the brewery. I'm pretty sure we may have spoke to that when we did the Coal Shed Brewery episode. But when we got our reverse osmosis system in there, to make 1 gallon of reverse osmosis water takes 2 gallons, and so that means you've got a gallon of good water and a gallon of tails water that just goes down the drain. And we put that tank in our alley that we collect all those tails and use it as wash down water on the floor. We use it for irrigation, but it's just again, brewing's not the most green of industries, so there are certainly ways that we can limit and do better. We just got to do better.
I mean, if you get to 50% less than the, even 25% less, breweries, let's be real, can be very, very wasteful. It's always been that way.
We're producing CO2.
Yeah, exactly. But you can. There's ways. It's very expensive, but there's ways to capture that too. So
the average brewery in the country uses between 3 and 4 barrels of water for every 1 barrel that they produce of beer. We're at 3.1 is where we're at. We measure that. We keep track of it. But it's something you have to remind people because water's everywhere and you're using it all the time. But I remember when we had other breweries or other architects and stuff would come over and they'd look and they'd see this kind of extensive system of where we captured the tails and they're like, what is all this? Like, well, that's still good water for floor washing and some other things. It's very hard water, but it's stuff that we can use for other things. Otherwise, it's just going to go down the drain.
Sure.
And so we want to get there. So
well, and like you mentioned, that's probably a cost saving for you. Now you're not just spraying water that you're paying for. You've already paid for that water.
Right.
I can tell you from my experience, water, electricity, any sort of precious, somewhat disappearing resource that's out there, it may not make sense now when you invest in that, but the cost of those things are going up and up and up. And solar, when I put it in originally, we don't have solar. Unfortunately, because we rent the building and we just couldn't work it out with the landlord to put solar out there. And that's one that bothers me, but it is what it is. But I put solar on my house and it wasn't totally that it would make sense. But my God, we were 16 cents a kilowatt back then. And here we are 9 years later and we're like 26 cents a kilowatt. I'm making a killing off my solar. But if you invest in things where the resource is precious, it will pay off if you're in it for the long run. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Sure.
Yeah, and another thing that we're working on, we have 3 restaurants, and so a lot of what we do is we produce a lot of trash at the end of the day.
We do.
And so Kent's been a champion and working forward on this from his desk is working on trying to compost more. So a lot of like for instance, the Coal Shed, we have our little pie wagon food truck there, and so I'd say before we were at about like 60% of the plateware and things that we used were compostable. So we thought. Yeah. And so, you have all this plasticware, potatoware, or the kind of things that they say are compostable. But when you go to it's all about your local municipality. If they're not composting them, it's not compostable. You're paying twice the amount to get things that you feel are doing the right thing for the earth and for sustainability. And we found out like a lot of the stuff we were buying just is getting kicked out because it doesn't turn over in the rate that they need it. It's just a different facility. They don't have the right heat for the right amount of time to make it happen. So we really, I think now we're around 98% of all of our plateware and things at the Coal Shed location is compostable. So we were able to reduce our trash by 2/3. Yeah. So we, our dumpster that was costing us $1,700 a month, we've now got that cost down to $700 a month because it's really the trash that they bill you upon. But we got more compost bins now, and so they're picking up more compost. And that was just it needs to make sense financially, but it's part of this sustainability that it's the right thing to do. The more things that we can side stream and take out of the landfill, the better. I mean, same reason, all of our spent grains going to a rancher, all of our our organics are getting tilled back into a field on the rancher's property, and so just trying to look at every aspect and corner to do better. I keep saying that, but
and some of that, of course, is fairly simple.
Yeah,
like you said, it didn't cost you anything to find the rancher.
Right.
Not everybody has that luxury where if you're in the middle of a city, but some of that thing is just simple. And composting, I love. Recycling. Whew. I'll talk to you off air, Ken. That's a whole can of worms for me. When you say it feels like a kind of a scam, like a hidden thing there,
it is.
There's so many. But composting is much simpler, and it is not a scam. And I love that municipalities are now offering those bins. You don't even have to do your own composting. Where I'm at in Martinez, they started saying, in your yard waste bin, go ahead and start putting your compost in there. And you can come pick up X amount of compost a month to put back in your own garden. So Martinez is giving it back to us if we want it. But even if you don't want it, put it in there anyway. So some of this stuff is relatively simple, and I do think that municipalities need to be helping out.
Well, I tell you, one thing we had to kind of bulldog our way through, and it was interesting because we have the tap house over in Benicia. And we actually won a sustainability award over there. We've been crushing it for the last couple of years over there. But the difference was it's a different waste management company over in the Benicia area than it is over in Vallejo. And in Benicia, they let you use those compostable bags. Yeah, green bags. And so, there's this huge thing in a restaurant. You're bringing all this just raw food out. And to just dump it into like an open dumpster and have it get picked up, the health department does not look very kindly on that. Neither does my chef. Neither does, we don't look very kindly on that. And so over in Benicia, we can use the bags, and it's easy peasy. You put the bags in the can, you scrape everything into it, you throw the bags in the compostable dumpster. Mm-hmm. They come pick it up and haul it away. So it was easy. In Vallejo, because of a different group that we work with in Vallejo, they don't allow the bags. And I don't want to get too complicated, but it really comes down to they actually do their own composting. It's all organic. They sell it to the vineyards in Napa. And so they can't have these little pieces of green bag, even if they are compostable and they're not composting long enough or at a high enough temperature to get rid of the green bags. And, and I was like, we can't do this over here. The health department won't let us do it. How do we solve this? And we finally got to a solution. It took us like 3 months and a whole bunch of meetings where they actually accepted the bags over in Vallejo. And now we went from a 4-yard dumpster down to a 1-yard dumpster for trash because everything else is going out through that. But, to your point, plastic, I mean, don't get me started on this. And I don't want to sound like all recycling's horrible. I think there's a goal behind it. They're trying to do the right thing. But you look at the statistics of what actually gets recycled. And I think the thing that really bothered me was we spent so much money on these recyclable plastic, like ketchup containers and all forks that are recyclable and all this different stuff. And when we were at the material recovery facility, they're like, basically anything smaller than 4 inches in diameter, we just don't have time to pick it out of the stream as it comes by. And I'm like, so we're spending all this extra money on recyclable plastic forks, and none of them are getting recycled. And that was really, really disheartening. And so that's where we went to compostable forks that we now can put into our bags that we had to bulldog our way through that can go into the compost stream. And I think in the end, it's going to be a net gain from a financial perspective, and certainly for the earth. I will say it was a lot of time. We spent a lot of time on it. And so now, I mean, if anybody's listening out there and you want to know restaurant or whatever else, call me. I'll shortcut this thing for you by like 90%. And that's more, what we need is good, honest discussion about what's actually happening and what's not happening and how we can make it work. And I'll tell you, interestingly, the whole label thing, we're talking to the label producer, actually a different label producer who does clean flake technology. And I'm saying, well, we want this on PET backing. It's this backing because Ryan he runs the canning line. And whenever we used paper backing, it would rip. I don't know if it's our canning line. I don't know.
It's just kind of the path of travel that the label does. It does some really sharp turns on like a knife, and it would just rip, and it just really slows things down.
So we moved to PET backing for logistical reasons, but that stuff's all been going in the trash. But in talking to the label space, he's like, you know what? We have a facility that actually collects all that stuff, and we'll actually recycle it back here. And we're like, really? And it's right near some of our accounts. And so we just set a bin right next to the canning line. We throw that in there. I mean, it's a lot that we throw in there.
The other thing that came of that too is, in addition to the these PET backers that they accept, they also take shrink wrap. Like the amount of shrink wrap that we go through just from, grain pallets coming in has got shrink wrap around it. We're sending pallets of beer out to Costco's. That's got shrink wrap on it. Our in-house guy that does, Kieran, that does all the pulls to the different tap rooms, when he, downsizes from one pallet to another, he puts a new layer of shrink wrap. Now we collect it all. And every 6 weeks, we drop off 2 half-ton picking bins worth of shrink wrap that they're all collectively gathering. And so just through this, you kind of find the people that are also trying to do the right thing.
Sure.
And it's been, again, nice to connect with them and to join the cause.
And quick shout out, there's this thing, Napa Waste Zero.
Yeah.
And they got together. It's a woman from St. Superi that's really kind of helped spearhead it. But there's probably 40, 50 winemakers on this thread, because Ryan and I come from a wine background, and we got into this label thing and everything. Now we're on there. And that's where basically that shrink wrap came out of that. And they're like, you can just drop it off. And I never
would have guessed that.
Yeah.
It is as easy or easier than throwing it in the trash can, quite frankly. It's just really easy for us to do. And then the crazy thing is, my wife gets all over me because I have bags in the back of my car, but every time I go in the grocery store, I forget to take them in there. And then I pay 10 cents a bag, and I get home, sometimes even think about transferring it back into the bags because I know my wife's going to yell at me for using those bags. And so the nice thing is I just can take those down to the brewery now, and I can throw them in the bin with it, and it gets made into furniture,
nice filling,
like furniture, like you would go
patio
to
furniture,
like you would go to a playground and that the kids play on and stuff like that.
Yeah,
it's fake wood furniture that they make out of it, and they've sent I don't remember the facts and figures, but they've had it picked up a bunch of times. It's tons and tons and tons of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And like I said, it hasn't cost us anything. In fact, now we're paying less because we have a 1-yard dumpster rather than a 4-yard dumpster.
And like Kent said, he mentioned, Brooke at St. Superi, she's the one, like they have a dumpster that we can dump at the Napa Zero Waste location, but they have their own baler at their winery. And so we drive right by there as we're doing delivery. So our delivery driver, she's just like, just drop it off at the winery. We'll add it to our bales and then take it down there. So, again, it's such a great community once you're really digging into it.
And you just got to dive in a little bit to get some help. All right, guys. Well, let's take another quick break. And when we come back, I want to talk about kind of the craft beer industry in general, like what trends you're seeing. Because if we're going to talk about how Mare Island is going on into the future, I think we have to talk a little bit about right now and what we see happening. So hang in there. You're listening to Battleships to Beer, 10 years of Mare Island Brewing Company, and we'll be right back.
Hey, Ryan and Kent here, and we just want to say, if you get a chance, we'd love it if you check out our bonus episodes, because we took a stab at this ourselves. I mean, Ryan, you got to sit down with Jim Murkowski.
Yeah, Murkowski was telling us some fun stuff about him being the film commissioner of Mare Island, and then you got to talk to one of the 21ers, right?
Yeah, Jake Sloan, super cool cat. I mean, amazing piece of history, American hero as far as I'm concerned. And I also got Chef David, and I got his dad, and they have 7 relatives that worked on Mare Island, so we got to talk to kind of a multi-generational aspect of all that. And then, let's see, you got with Sparky, right?
I was going to say, you actually missed out, because I got to talk to Steve Togner, who actually was on some of the missions of Ivy Bells and was the only one on the submarine to be able to know where they were going. And then, of course, you should be jealous because I got the Wolf episode. So the things the Wolf came out with. Whew.
Listener, if you haven't heard the Wolf episode, I got to listen to it right after they recorded it, and I've never been so jealous of not being in a room during a conversation in my entire life. So, if you got it, if you're interested in what we have to say, you'll be a lot more interested hearing this stuff from the source. We've got some great bonus episodes. Please check them out.
Welcome back to Battleships to Beer, 10 years of Mare Island Brewing Company. This is episode 10, and we are getting through some of the important things in the industry now and what's ahead for Mare Island Brewing Company. And as I mentioned before the break, we wanted to talk a little bit about the craft brewing industry itself, because we're seeing some headwinds right now.
It's a little rough right
now, for sure.
I mean, I've talked to breweries who are doing fantastic. I've talked to breweries who are closing. I've talked to more who are kind of right in the middle, and we're all trying to figure this out together. So where are you guys on the state of the industry?
Well, as I mentioned, sometimes the best plan for being a 30-year brand is to survive the next couple weeks or the next couple years or something. Sure. It's not that bad for us. It's not the heady days of pre-COVID, but I mean, we're seeing the same headwinds everybody else is, and I think the question mark, and hell, Justin, you're one of the people I would talk to ask these kind of questions about, is do you need to shift your business model? Do you actually have to make some moves? Or are we just kind of sitting through a weird little lull here? I mean, we come from the wine industry originally. There's about a 7-year, you can almost plot it on a graph of the depression level that goes up in wineries because they've overplanted. Here comes all this, consumption hasn't kept up, and everybody's in a frenzy. And honestly, everybody I know who's invested in that ugly year number 7 has made a mint in years 2 through 5 because it comes back around. And I think there's a big question here of like, have we reached peak craft brew? Do we need to make any moves or whatever? I feel like we're pretty well positioned personally, but we've seen a lot of closures.
Yeah. I mean, every time I see a closure, I think these days I'm like 10%, I pucker a lot. And then 90%, I just kind of see it as other opportunities. And, again, I don't think that we're, anybody's, not going to be a victim of the current trend. But, I think our 3 locations, and we're more retail heavy than we are wholesale heavy on our balance of business and revenue. And so, people are still going out to eat. They might not be going out as many times to eat, but they're still coming to our locations to eat. And, who knows what the next beer trend, alcohol trend, was when the seltzers came out, everybody was jumping on that and everything. And, now what's really big is non-alcoholic beers. Yeah. And I know we've talked off air about that, but, it's kind of like seeing what way that goes. Now, do you jump all the way in, or do you just kind of, enjoy the moment with it? And, we're just trying to navigate that a little bit, I think. And
sure.
I think, it sticks to who we are as a brand and what our ethos is behind our beer is we've always stuck to the classic styles of beer, and they're classic because they've been around, they're going to be around, they'll be around in the future. And, we're not chasing these trends. And so we're hoping that kind of like foundational spirit of our craft beers is what will maintain through these, as Kent says, lulls of what's going on.
Like most complicated questions, I think the answer starts with "it depends."
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
Which sucks, but that's the truth. And it really does depend at your size and the niche market that you guys have found. To answer your question, Kent, that you didn't really ask, I don't think you really change your business model. Certainly not drastically. In fact, if I were making decisions at your brewery, I wouldn't even dive into the NA beer trend at your size. Now, if I'm Sierra Nevada, I dive into it. And they are.
They are.
If I'm Lagunitas, I dive into it. Because even if it's a 1% market share that you gain by doing that, that's a big number for them.
Right.
For you guys, 1% isn't worth the manpower, right? Or the advertising cost to get that 1%. So I don't think that small brewers need to go crazy with the trends, but I do think if you don't have an established brand that people are really loyal to, I think the headwinds are tough. And I think that's what we're seeing in some of the closures. You guys have an established brand that people are loyal to. Another one that I've been following recently is Bear Bottle in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. They have a really good established brand that people in San Francisco are responding to. And they're growing while breweries in San Francisco around them are closing. And so those are some of the it depends variables, right?
Yeah, I do feel like, there's a whole suddenly health conscious thing going on out there that says that alcohol is bad. Whereas you go back not too long ago and they were saying, look at the French, we need to drink a glass of red wine every single night or whatever. And, truth to be told, I think the reality is somewhere in between at the end of the day. But there's definitely a swing in that direction. So you look at things like that and you think, all right, by not having more non-alcoholics to offer, are we, not capturing some of these customers that would come in and experience Mare Island, experience the history, experience our food? Maybe they're not experiencing our beer, but they're experiencing our craft in some way when we're into it. And so, we've been looking at that, and we've actually added a couple non-alcoholics.
But I guess my question would be, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but why does it have to be non-alcoholic beer? And that's kind of what I'm getting at with this sort of like, if 1% of your customers come in and they not only do they want something non-alcoholic, but they want it to be non-alcoholic beer, to me, that's still such a small number. And I read the Brewers Association stats that it doesn't talk about 1%. It talks about more than that. But in my anecdotal experience, I'm not seeing that. Mm-hmm. So I would rather offer, and I'm not saying Coca-Cola, but maybe something else unique that's non-alcoholic. Sure. Mocktails.
Sure. Right.
Something that you can create cheaper, put your signature on, without trying to solve the puzzle that is non-alcoholic beer, which is a very complicated thing.
It's an extremely complicated thing.
We looked at it, and it is.
Yeah.
It's
There's a reason no one's ever perfected it.
And to try to do it, I don't know how they do it profitably at the end of the day.
Yes.
It's more expensive than brewing beer at the end of the day to try to do this sometimes. And it's just
and it can be dangerous.
And more dangerous. I was going to say,
yeah.
That when I started reading into it, and I'm reading words like salmonella and E. coli because of the high sugar content in these. That's why you don't find non-alcoholics on draft. Yeah. It's always got to be in a package, because they have to pasteurize it.
Yeah, and we're actually saying the same thing in terms of we're just trying to figure out how to adjust to what is a little bit of it's either trend or maybe it's a new reality of the people who still want to go out and a mocktail. They still want to go out and they want to experience what we have to offer as a location for them to visit, but. We are very beer heavy. That's what we do or whatever. And so we've been kind of looking at some things, around that. One of the things that's worked for us, and I won't claim that we're brilliant about it or something, is that we see a lot of these closures going on, and we know a little bit behind the scenes. I mean, some of it's from talking to people like you, Justin, or whatever, but like a lot of these breweries got way out over their skis financially,
right?
Because there was a time there where you could make an IPA, call it something wacky, put some sort of wacky label on it, and sell it all day long. It didn't matter really whether it was any good or whatever else. And these people said, you know what? We just saw Lagunitas sell for $500 million. We just saw Ballast Point sell for whatever. Let's get all these investors. Let's put $30 million into this facility, and we're going to go for it. And I'm not going to say they made a bad decision because, I mean, ultimately, if they're closing now, I guess it looks like
in hindsight they did.
Yeah. In hindsight, but at the time, it was a reasonable bet. I get it. I could have made the bet myself. I get where it's at, but the reality is things shifted, and there's just no right in the ship after something like that's happened. So the closures we've seen, for the most part, I don't want to insult anybody. I feel like they either just got into a situation that they can't, that just wasn't going to work, or maybe it wasn't super well managed to begin with or whatever. But we're all feeling the headwinds. It's just those headwinds start taking out the smaller ships, or not the smaller ships, but the less nimble ships, I guess, if you will, on it. So we feel pretty good, but there's no doubt margins are getting squeezed. There's
sure.
And nice.
Well, here's the thing. We talk about the side where younger drinkers are either not really drinkers or not drinking as much beer, but we don't talk about the front side of that as much. And the front side of that is our regulars, our core customers, are either aging out or healthing out, right? A little bit of, let's face it, there's been some overconsumption in craft beer over the last decade. Like during the boom, we use this hobby we call craft beer as an excuse for alcoholism in some people's cases. And I'm not saying that's across the board, but what I'm noticing at the Hop Grenade and through my listenership at the Brewing Network, we're aging out and we're healthing out in some. And without a group to replenish that, it's a headwind. It's a challenge. And the group that is replenishing that, well, now you're asking the right questions. How do we support them, and how do we offer them something? They don't want to overconsume.
Right.
They don't want the same trends that their dad did. Yeah. So how do we create an environment that they relate to? And that's the real challenge. I don't think it's NA beer. I just haven't bought into this thing. I do think it's things like mocktails, and I do think, especially at a brewery your size, hop water.
Yeah, we're working on that as well right now.
Too.
Yeah.
It's not as difficult to do. It's refreshing. It's unique. It's unique to beer. You're not really stepping outside of what you already create. Right. So, yeah, but the headwinds across the industry in general, as I guess I could summarize, is there is a problem of consumers. We need more of them. And so how do we capture them? And again, I think that you guys, just from a marketing perspective, when you have a brand that people can relate to, that's more than half of the battle. Yeah. So you guys only have to solve a little bit of it. If you're still creating a brand that people relate to, you're in a lot more trouble, because you've got to figure that out and figure out this what do we feed them problem.
Well, to that point, one of the things is that for a while there, we were really pushing into wholesale, and we were really, we got the canning line, we got everything else as we were going, but we've always had these 3 tap rooms, and they've always been sort of small pillars of the community in some ways. And that's a lot of what we're embracing, as Ryan was saying. People may not be going out quite as frequently, but they're still going out. We're still providing this incredible, service to the community. We're still providing a gathering place to the community. And to us, you want to keep growing in business. You want to, but we don't have this big ambition of being countrywide or even west of the Rockies or anything like that. We really want to deliver to within like 30 or 40 miles of the brewery. I mean, we just bought a new van the other day just for that purpose, and really focus on those tap rooms. And at the end of the day, Chef David and his food, there's a reason why, as a brewery, our mission is to share Mare Island through craft and not craft beer. Now, craft beer is a huge part of what we do, and we're very proud of the beer and everything else. But we'll sell handmade growlers, we'll sell merchandise, we'll sell you name it. We're jumping in there to try to say, if this tells the story of Mare Island, it's artisanal and it's cool. That's something that we'll consider if we can wrap it into our brand. So we're trying to grow by actually focusing a little bit more local at this point because of the sort of bloodbath that's out there in the broader territory.
And I think that's key. I think just because, yes, people are still going out, they are going out less. So why are they going to choose you?
Right.
And you guys have cracked that code. You keep honing in on the reason, you're giving people reasons to choose you. And most of that is that you're a community-based local brewery that really supports Mare Island and the history and all the things we've been talking about for 10 episodes. That, to me, answers this question about what do we do next? More of the same. That's what I think you guys do next.
Yeah, thank you.
I think in our sector, part of those headwinds is, again, when we started, I think there was 4,200 craft breweries in the United States 10 years ago. There's over 9,000 now. And so some of the bigger, medium-sized breweries, like, it doesn't matter to the person in Texas that, there's this San Francisco beer or whatever. It really needs to be about your local community more and more.
Yeah.
It's the one thing I think that Kent and I have held true to is we didn't take on massive debt. We don't have a lot of investors. Like, we are just perfect in our own pod here to service our community as a craft brewery. So it's just continuing to stay local and really refine who you are locally instead of trying to get outside of the, try to add another zero to your revenue or whatever by going out. It just, you just trench in, I think, a little more.
And I've had experience in past business where all right, boy, tough times. All right, let's get the banker together. Let's get the investors together. Let's talk about what's going to happen. Nobody's happy. We got to figure out what's going on. The beauty of this is I'm like, hey, Ryan, can we meet up in your office in about an hour? All right, let's talk about this. How are we going to do this? Let's make some decisions. And then we just plow forward. And it's been, we maybe missed a few opportunities to grow a little faster over the last 10 years, but it has kept it very manageable and very defensible in a lot of ways, which feels good on it. And I will say I think overall, people have been drinking alcohol and wine and beer for,
millennia.
It's just an ongoing, and it's a huge part of society. I think your point about maybe this isn't your dad's craft brew experience where it was an excuse for alcoholism is a very poignant point, but it's not going away. It's not like, oh my gosh, alcohol's not bad for you, so let's all leave it or something like that. It has a role in society. It's a social lubricant. It's a part of celebration, everything else. And wine has always been like, beer's like always been like that. And I think we hang our hat on the fact that that's always going to be around, and we're going to be a part of that. We also, Brian mentioned this once before. There is this book, and I didn't bring it up in my top 3 books that I would take with me to an island, but it is one of the most important ones to me. It's referred to as The Great Good Place. It was written years and years ago, and one of the guys who sort of made this book famous was Howard Schultz from Starbucks. And The Great Good Place, he had read it. It's all about, and it goes back to the English pub back in the day, and even back to the Grecians and to the Romans. It's where people gathered, and you might have your own opinions. You might even have a few friends that have your exact same opinion. But until you show up at the pub or the public house and you compare those opinions against somebody else who's sitting across from you, that you're looking in the eye, you're not on the internet, you're not in a chat room, you're not in an echo chamber. You are looking them in the eye, and you're kind of testing out your theories. They're testing out yours. You're arguing through these theories, et cetera. And it was a place that they call it the third place, is another thing you'll hear people talk about. It's not home and it's not work. It's a third place that you can go to. And they're critical to the fabric of society. And I take away a huge, huge amount of pride in the fact that we provide 3 of these, three third good places. And I think the Hop Grenade, I'm not just blowing sunshine here. Like, I think the Hop Grenade is exactly that kind of thing. And we need more of that, not less, in today's world, because, you can have the most extreme opinion ever, and you're going to find another 300 people in the country who are going to go into a chat room with you and just cheer you on. And until you sit down, I mean, tonight we have a mayoral candidates forum at our brewery. We're generally non-political. We don't endorse anybody. We try to treat everybody equally. But we have all 4 candidates for Vallejo coming to the brewery, and we'll probably have 100, 150 people there, something like that. And it's a great chance for discourse. And you know what? The pub, alcohol, food, it's all part of that great, good place. And I take a tremendous amount of pride that we've put that together in conjunction with the Mare Island history.
Mm-hmm. I think you're absolutely right. And there's not enough of it. And seeing places like this as places for that is probably, maybe key to the future in this younger generation. And the younger generation being afraid of discourse because of everything they've seen on the internet. Right. They feel like maybe discourse in person is just like all the cursing that happened to them on the internet. Right. And so to a sort of proof of concept, come on out and talk with people and find out that it's...
I didn't necessarily put this together, but when Ryan and I first partnered up on this project or whatever, well, I mean, one of the things that Ryan had worked at, it's probably a dozen different restaurants in Napa, but Napa, you're catering to a lot of visitation as well, and a well-heeled crowd that comes in from out of town. Mm-hmm. But you're also trying to create. I mean, these people who do this in Napa, they know that that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to create a great, good place, a third place, a place to hang out, a place to interact, a place to discover new foods, etc. And I think it's part of what's been our success. Is Ryan? I don't know if he thought about it at the time, but I think he shares that in a lot of ways of like somebody comes into our establishment. We want them to feel welcome. We want them to talk to the person next to them. We want them to engage in a little bit of history. We want to teach them about food. I mean, I remember Ryan putting out cheese plates that were light years ahead of where everywhere else was in Vallejo when we first started, because we were trying to up the bar a little bit on this stuff.
Yeah. And I think so people's staff has a huge role in creating that environment too. For example, our staff here happens to be very aware of creeps and does a good job of stepping in, because we want everyone to interact too. And every now and then you see an interaction that is not appropriate, and it might be happening right at the bar. Right. I'm so proud of my staff at being very good at sort of stepping in and saying, hey, I don't think this young lady wants to be spoken to right now. And so I'm not trying to open up a whole can of worms. I do just want to say that to create an environment, a great, good place, the staff really matters too. And you guys, I think, have done a good job of curating that. You got to buy into the brand. You got to buy into the concept. That's like number one for me. But then, and because once you do that, everything else flows outward from there. You know that means to me the place better be very comfortable. Otherwise, you didn't buy into the brand. Right. And
I'm glad you kind of brought that up, because there's certainly some of our staff that we just haven't come up in the course of this podcast. And I mean, it goes from our office to our sales reps out there. But I mean, like Christina, who's our assistant comptroller in the office, to Dana, our office manager, and Cheryl, we've mentioned a few times, our food and beverage director, and Sean, who's our outside sales manager, Stephanie, our events manager. Shelley, who's a Ferry Tap Room manager, and Dan over at the Tap House, just to name a slight few of the 90 employees we have right now. Yeah, they buy into what we're doing, and they understand it, and they're able to disseminate that down to the staff as well. And it it takes all walks of life to make what we do and to be one of these great, good places in the community. Yeah, and again, it all starts from a good story to tell.
And I'm going to start employing this term, creep filter. I love this. Is good. This is really
necessary.
Good. Hey, Justin, we really, I think we're kind of coming to a close here on these. I really want to thank you for sitting down. I mean, the spark of this idea, and we were kind of like, I don't know. Do
we have enough to talk about?
Does anybody want to listen to us all this time? But this has been, we've said it before, so thoroughly enjoyable. Yes. We've really gotten to know the Burmese restaurant right next door.
Excellent.
And a lot of memories. And like I said, it brings Ariana Brogan out of the woodwork we find out that she's getting married and all these different people, because they're listening to this, and if we can help spread the gospel of Mare Island a little bit, not just the brewery but the history at the same time, that's the fact that you got your bookkeeper, she's listening to our podcast. But really want to thank you for taking the time and doing this with us.
It's been my pleasure. I'm honored to be a part of it, so I'm really glad you guys thought of me and let me help you do it. Like I said, I feel like there's more episodes in us somewhere. This has just been so much fun. So my studio is your studio. studio. You let me know.
Well, we got to get one more baby delivered here at some point. We'll get them over the hump and go from there.
And we are working on hopefully a special, a little bonus episode we can get in here as well. So we got a little something extra we can still do.
We're still going a little bit longer.
Yeah. So stay subscribed because you could definitely find out a little bit more about what we have up our sleeve. And Ryan and I are working on some cool bonuses, and I know you guys have got a couple more too. The bonuses, by the way, if you haven't listened, go back and check them out. They've been some of the most interesting things that we've done because you really get to learn from the cast of characters, learn about the cast of characters from their own mouths that we've been talking about here on the show. So good stuff there. Well, guys, to 10 more years.
Yeah. Is
there a final question that you guys have to ask each other? Yeah. You didn't do it, did you?
Nah, we didn't come up with any questions this time, but, I hope that in the next 10 years we have at least 40 more questions here, and I mean, I know we will. We won't have all the answers as we haven't so far, but I don't. Yeah.
All right. Can I stump you guys with a final question?
Oh, yeah, please.
Well, part of the thing I enjoy about your story is the way that you two work together. So, if each of you could give me one or two keys to what makes a great partnership. And I'm sure, I know, Kent, that as a serial entrepreneur, you can probably agree, partnerships are one of the most difficult things in entrepreneurship.
They're so hard.
In fact, I don't even recommend them most of the time.
No.
But you guys do have a good partnership, and I love the way you guys work together and bounce ideas off of each other. So I'm just curious if you could give advice, two points to what makes a good partnership.
I'll start off on this because this is my first real partnership and whatnot, but I think it does come down to friends. You got to be friends first, and you have to start from equal footing. The hardest thing to do is when you're competing with each other. Kent and I actually serve two completely separate roles in our company, and yet we believe and are on the same page in that direction that each are going. So, like I've said it so simply, I make the money, he makes it make sense. Like, he doesn't necessarily come in and tell me how to brew the beer. He doesn't come in and tell me, hey, you've got to run wholesale like this. I'll come in and I'll ask him questions, and we'll have some guidance. But he ultimately believes in the direction that I'm going, and vice versa. I don't go in and try to change formulas around in his Excel spreadsheet, or I don't go in and say, like, you're talking to the wrong person in the permit office or whatnot. Like, I know that he is always in the best mind of the company. So you have to be aligned in some way. You can't be butting heads at all, or no one's getting forward. So I think we said, like, we've rarely ever come up against something where, like, we walk away from it and be like, okay, nope, it's just we're at an impasse. Like, there's always a solution, and you have to be in it together. It's a marriage. We say it all the time. He's my work wife. If he can put that into a conversation before me, I'm like, God damn it. But it's like any relationship. It's give and take. But when you're two guys with the same kind of passion, like I hope is coming through here, we both love history, we love our community, we love our family, we love our staff, then everything that comes out of that should hopefully reflect and show that. So that's what I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd probably add, first of all, I think you've got to have the respect in the beginning. If you don't have the respect, you're never going to survive the tough things that come up. And I think Ryan and I both have a tremendous amount of respect for each other. And so when something pops up that we don't necessarily see eye to eye on, I'm like, well, Ryan's got a perspective here that I'm going to respect. We may not agree, but we're going to get there, in some way. So that respect, which I, equates into friendship as well. But I would say one of the things that I've thought about this a lot, actually, is, if you draw, I think it's called a Venn diagram, but if you had two circles of, like, what is your, and you could, the circle can be anything. It can be your expertise. It can be your
belief system.
Age. It can be your belief system, or whatever. And you look at these two different circles, mine and Ryan's, or business partner one and business partner two. And I think what you want is, you don't necessarily want them to 100% overlay one another, because you're going to be in the same sandbox too often, and you're going to have too many arguments and everything else. But you also don't want them to be completely detached and side by side, where you're completely dividing and conquering on absolutely everything. What you really want is these things to overlap. And I don't know what the percentage is that it needs to overlap, but you got to make sure those really key parts are the parts that overlap. We agree on the brand. We agree on how we treat people. The sustainability came up. We both agreed this is the direction we want to head. We both handle customers in the same way. All those things fit in the center there. And the other things are things that I might be good at that Ryan doesn't have a lot of experience in. There's a ton of stuff that Ryan's got experience in that I don't have experience in. And so it's that like balance of that intersection that's got this whole respect wrapped around it. Mm-hmm. To me, that's what, and when I look back at the partnership I've had some good ones, I've had some bad ones, I've had some I've just barely survived. Those circles, they didn't work in the right way. And I think one of the things that's come out of being in Maryland Brewing Company with Ryan is, and I don't really plan on doing a whole lot more ventures, but if I were to do another venture, I would quickly start analyzing that little diagram and saying, all right, where do we overlap? Where do we not? Rather than, I think sometimes it's like, oh, that guy's got a great idea. I want to invest some money. Let's be partners. Boy, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
If you haven't thought about the intrinsic aspects of like, what are you going to agree on? What are you not? And the stuff you don't agree on, who's bringing expertise to the table on that?
Mm-hmm. So, okay.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, I have a takeaway from what you guys said, too, that I don't know if you've put a finger on, but just the word trust.
Sure.
Indeed.
And by the way, I don't mean being trustworthy people. That's an important part. But the part of the Venn diagram that's not you, Kent, and the part of the Venn diagram that's not you, Ryan, you fully trust that the other one is going to handle their piece.
Yep.
Not only with integrity, but with expertise. And if they don't have the expertise, they're gonna defer to someone who has it. So you guys, I think one of the things that really works for you is that you trust that the other one's going to do it right and do right by the company.
It's true.
Spot on.
Yeah.
We don't have a prenup in this one. So yeah, you have to trust.
Yeah. Divorce would be really expensive. It'd be really tough.
All right, gentlemen. Well, one final time, congratulations on 10 years at Mare Island. I think you've been excellent stewards of the history of the island and your own brand, and it's been fascinating and fun for me to follow along in this podcast. So congrats once again, and thanks for doing this with me.
Thank you very much. Damn the torpedoes.
And thank you, listeners. We appreciate you.
All right, folks, stay subscribed because there will be some bonuses coming your way. And who knows, maybe episodes in the future. In the meantime, thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you next time. If you want to see historical and other photos to events referenced in this podcast, head on over to the Mare Island Brewing Company website at mareislandbrewingco.com or check out the link in the show notes for this episode.